China did make the right choice in holding the CEO of Huawei accountable, but we do see that China is retaliating. They're showing that iron fist that they have.
They're facing over there the torture, everything, you name it, as the Chinese call it, re-education, the vocational training center. The truth is they're there for the torture, for the brainwash.
They are basically Christians and they are worshiping. There is no political activity here. But like a man like the Wang Zhen, he's 43 years old, that was killed and tortured for his faith. This has happened right now in China.
A lot of Chinese people, even they are here, they are very, very scared because they know that the Chinese government could watch them here in Canada. They can follow you, they can close your account if you are not obeyed to them.
From the Zoomerplex in historic Liberty Village, the Zoomer with Libby Znaimer.
Welcome to the Zoomer. I'm Libby Znaimer. The relationship between China and Canada has been a difficult one as our country tries to strike a balance between standing up for Canadian values and human rights and recognizing the economic dominance that country yields. It reached a crisis back in December with the arrest of Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou in Vancouver, the detentions of Canadians Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig in China, and the death penalty handed to convicted drug dealer Robert Schellenberg. All of this took place against the backdrop of the U.S. trade dispute with China. We'll take a closer look at this and China's ongoing human rights abuses. But first, let's tee up the topic.
Since China's opening and reform in the 80s, it's experienced an economic boom and a growing influence on the world stage. And yet, its record on human rights remains among the worst in the world. At least 100 million religious believers belong to groups facing very high levels of persecution. As many as 3 million Chinese Muslims are believed to be detained in political re-education camps. More than 3,700 Protestant Christians were detained last year. And spiritual groups like Falun Gong are outright banned and subject to regular crackdowns. Amid a decline in executions worldwide, China remains the world's top executioner, carrying out thousands of death sentences annually, more than the rest of the world combined. And press freedom is at an all-time low. Thousands of websites blocked, many for years, including major news and social media hubs like the New York Times, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Despite such gross violations, China's human rights record remains largely unchallenged.
And just in, evidence that China is using DNA to ramp up surveillance on its own citizens. So why has China been able to get away with so many abuses, so many violations for so long? Majid.
Moral dilemma. The Chinese issue become our moral dilemma, not just in Canada, but also internationally and around the world. From one side, we want to make a business with them. Their money is important to our economic, but in the same time, our Western society decided, or our Western leaders decided to turn a blind eye for their human rights abuses. Something that's been happening for the Uyghurs, Falun Gongs, Tibetans, Christians, and for the normal Chinese person that wants to live in freedom and express his mind and his opinions. Sadly, China become our moral dilemma.
Okay, but Reverend, what I'm used to hearing from people who are so-called experts, foreign policy people, think tank people is, you will never get the Chinese to change their way by embarrassing them. You have to be nice, you have to speak softly, and that's the way to get things done. How did that get to be so acceptable among, I would say, the ruling class here?
Well, I think over the years, Chinese people under the communism control with all kinds of hardship, harassment, or even a persecution. And then people start to see, without seeing any true self, all they do is pretending. But in fact, most of the time, the true self from the under that is a lot of pain, a lot of hatred, a lot of struggle. And that's why you don't see that nice attitude anymore.
So how did Canadians come to believe this?
Actually, what is the nature of the Chinese communist is lie, violence, and monopoly. When they use lies, not only used to its own people, but used to the whole world. And many Canadians were being lied, include our minister, Justin Trudeau's father.
Pierre Trudeau.
Pierre Trudeau. Yeah, he was invited to China many times. And in the 60s, when Chinese people died, about millions of people died the years, but he praised China as the new form of political system. And of course, the Chinese government also used a lot of violence to silence its own people.
Okay, but I'm asking about Canada. So how do you think, did Canada just get bamboozled? How did this happen that for so long this was the word from Canadians, that we had to take it easy on China, that being very forthright was not the way to get anywhere with them?
I think we've seen that, especially when it comes to Tibet, Canadian policy has changed over the years, and it changes with leadership as well. I think we see that there's a lot of problems that Canada has as well. Even though around the world, internationally, Canada is known for having, very, very good morals, considering, freedom of expression important. But when it comes to China, we see that many countries, including Canada, are afraid because of, again, that economic power that China has.
But in reality, Libby, when we're talking about people that are advocating that we have to take it easy on China so we can, until we promote freedom of religion step by step, I believe that these people is part of the problem. They are not part of the solution. And if they were right, this human right in China will be improving by now, but it's not. It's actually getting worse and worse. So their theory and their doctrine proven wrong and mistaken over and over and over.
So again, Itibar, were they just bamboozled? Or are they Chinese apologists? How did this happen in your view?
In my view, as a perspective of the Uyghur people in East Turkestan, as she said, and I agree with her, that because of the Canadian policy, and because of the Chinese, for the moral perspective, because of their financial situation so strongly affects any other country or the world, that's why they really trusted themselves that they can do anything they want, which they have been doing this kind of the bad things to their own people, especially as you mentioned earlier, that the DNA samples from their own people, taking the passports away from them. So the only thing that I can say is that dealing with the China at this time, I believe is a big experience for any other country, especially the Canada perspective.
So are Canadians just naive? Is that what happened, or were they in China's pocket?
Canadians is not naive. I think our government is stupid. I believe,
stupid?
Stupid. I believe that when we are deciding that we focus more on the financial benefits, when we are focusing more on what we can gain out of this relationship, of course, I'm not sitting in the seat of the Prime Minister. Of course, he has his own people and his own economic. But we have to remember one thing. All Canadians prefer to live free and poor than rich and be in the pocket of China.
Okay, but there's just one thing I want to clear up here, is that even before this government came to power, if you talk to any academic, foreign policy expert, that's what they would have told you. So, so I think it's beyond government. So are Canadians have they just been bamboozled?
I believe that the Canadians just put their head in the sand. They was not aware, they are not educated about the situation in China. I believe that China have a lot of men and organizations that lobby on their behalf. And I believe in the same time, they was able to suppress the information, their intelligence was able to suppress the information that coming out of China, and even Canadian Chinese citizens was under threat even here in Canada.
Okay, we'll explore that more when we come back, and more on the turmoil between Canada and China.
This is hurting us as Canadians, as it's hurting also the Americans. This new technology that they are creating can spy on us. They commit fraud. Anybody commit crime, international crime, have to be accountable.
I can say this. The unlawful detention of 2 Canadian citizens is unacceptable. They ought to be returned. The United States has stood for that, whether they're our citizens or citizens of other countries. We ask all nations of the world to treat other citizens properly, and the detention of these 2 Canadian citizens in China ought to end.
And I just want to say and reassure all Canadians, but especially the family and friends of Mr. Kovrig, Mr. Satfor, this is a huge priority for our government. We are extremely seized of this issue. We fight for all Canadians detained abroad.
For the past few months now, the diplomatic dispute between Canada and China has been making headlines around the world. First, there was the arrest of Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou, and then the subsequent detention of Canadians Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig in China, a move many believe was in retaliation for Meng's arrest. So did Canada make the right decision by stepping in at the request of the United States and taking Meng into custody? And does the SNC-Lavalin scandal unfolding in Ottawa put the lie to the government's claim that politics and the judicial system are completely separate here? So what do you think about that, Sonam?
Well, I think even if you look at it from a moral standpoint, there's a reason why we have laws in the free world. And the rule of law, we follow that, right? So I definitely think that Canada did make the right choice in holding the CEO of Huawei accountable. But we do see that, China is retaliating. They're showing that iron fist that they have, right? So I think that we've seen just this back and forth between trying to show who's more powerful, when in fact, I think it's the right move, and I think that Canada definitely needs to hold her accountable.
Idibar, do you think Canada did the right thing by arresting her?
Yes, I think that Canada has done the right job because the Americans are the big allies for the Canada. So as been living with the Chinese, especially the Chinese Communist Party, for such a long time. So I can definitely say that the Canada has done the right thing 100%. I can assure you that.
What do you say to Canadians who disagree with that? They say, why should we have done this at the Americans' request? We're the ones paying the price. And in the meantime, you have Donald Trump saying, well, maybe that becomes a negotiating point in the U.S.-China trade dispute. Reverend Andrew?
Yes, maybe in the beginning, when the people don't know anything about Huawei, we tend to think that way. But after knowing that, what happened, and then I believe people who know the result now will certainly agree with what Canada do. And one thing I like to point out is that when this thing happened, and all we can hear, or the harassment is from China to Canada. They never say any single thing to America. Never arrest anything for something. Why? I think they are bullying us. And during the time when that happened, China was having a trade war with the United States. These issues could damage their game in the trade war. So they, instead of retaliate to American, they keep quiet, hoping that they get the trade. Yet all of the blame is to Canada. I found it that's very, very unfair. And
well, it is unfair, but a lot of people say, we're the ones getting hurt in this. Why should we? It's not our fight.
Mm-hmm. Huawei is like a Chinese high-tech submarine. Before Meng Wanzhou was arrested, the submarine is operating underwater. And since Meng Wanzhou was arrested, So it has been to show up on the surface of the sea. And it makes a lot of people to understand that Huawei is closely working with the Chinese government. There are a lot of evidence online, and Huawei helped the Chinese regime to establish many high-tech technologies to persecute people. And also, not only in China, Huawei closely working with a lot of dictators in Africa. So this is a very new step that makes the whole world to understand what is the Chinese government.
What do you say to people who say, why did we get involved with this? We're the ones hurt, not the Americans.
I think, first of all, let's put it in concept. The financial officer of Huawei company will receive a fair treatment than that any of the Chinese citizen will receive in China. This is number one.
And she's on house arrest. She's allowed to go shopping into restaurants until her curfew at 11 or something.
Absolutely. But I will leave completely this whole, the financial officer and what China is doing and what Donald Trump will be doing about that. Let's take a look at Huawei itself, at this new technology, G5.
Well, before we get there,
yes.
just so what do you say to people who say, why get involved with this when we're paying the price?
I would say that this is hurting us as Canadians, as it's hurting also the Americans. This new technology that they are creating can spy on us. They commit fraud. Anybody commit crime, international crime, have to be accountable to their crime, and that's exactly why we need to arrest her and cooperate with the Americans about that.
Okay. Well, the other thing that's happened since then. When she was arrested, of course, our government, Justin Trudeau, said, hey, this is not politics. We are signatories to an international convention. We were asked to arrest her, and we did. And this is completely separate. She's going to get a fair trial. Now, in the meantime, there is a scandal in Ottawa that gets worse by the day, which is exactly about about politicians, about the government trying to interfere in a judicial process against SNC-Lavalin, an iconic Quebec company. So how does that hurt our credibility, and how does it play into this?
Listen, politicians, we have to understand politicians plays with different rules. I always say politicians like diapers. They have to change more often, and for the same reason, they start to stink. So basically, when we're playing by the law, he will mention the law. When the law is in his benefits, he will mention that. But as we see the scandal is unfolding right now, when it's something that's hurting him, he would try to go around the law. Why are we surprised from a man that in his campaign he said, I admire the dictatorship in China? Why are we surprised from that? That's all what I'm saying about it.
Okay, but again, there are still a lot of Canadians who say, we are paying the price. And what do you think about Donald Trump stepping in the midst of all of this and saying, hey, you know, if we get the right trade deal, maybe we can negotiate on Mountain?
Donald Trump, I know he's a big mouth guy. He said a lot of things that I don't agree, but he's trying to limit the Chinese with the trade. I think what he's doing very right, because the Chinese government, why I said that being very smart after the Tiananmen Square massacre, they know that they lost the trust from the world, but they turned to another way and, to be very nice to the West and to open the market. They can make money there.
Okay. When we come back, we'll take a closer look at China's disturbing human rights record.
3 Tibetan nuns actually committed suicide and left notes that explicitly said that they couldn't bear the pain of being harassed by the Chinese government.
Welcome back. According to the Pew Research Center's 9th annual study on global restrictions on religion, China had the highest levels of social hostilities involving religion. The government routinely restricts and prohibits religious practices while imprisoning thousands of people based on their beliefs. So is there anything we can do about this, or is it time for Canada to give up trying to influence China and its policies? So first of all, what's happening with the Uyghurs, who are Chinese Muslims?
For especially the last 2 years, we've been hearing from, actually, we are not able to hear from anything from them, but from the friends, how they make the connection. So the Uyghurs are not allowed to pray, to go to mosque, because a lot of mosques are being demolished. The people, they are not able to wear a beard. The women, they are not able to wear a hijab or the long skirt, maybe. If they do not follow the instruction that the Chinese Communist Party has brought to all for this restriction, they're being sent to concentration camps. So the children under 18, so they are not able to go to mosque to pray. So all the Qurans, the holy books, they're burnt. Their phones are being checked. So if they find something about the religious thing, so they're being sent to the Nazi concentration right away. They're facing over there the torture, everything, you name it, as the Chinese call it, re-education, the vocational training center. But unfortunately, it's not the truth. The truth is they're there for the torture, for the brainwash.
What about Christians? What's the situation of Christians?
Well, as a pastor of a Protestant church, my heart goes to all of the people, including any other religion that's been suffered from the persecution of China. And I think China has made a big mistake, thinking that the human being can control other human beings without knowing that there is a much more powerful God out there to control. As a Christian, we're not surprised at all for any persecution happening to Christian or any other. But from the Christian standpoint, we found that all this persecution is only make Christian a lot stronger. And then you see the Chinese Christian number is growing almost like a wildfire.
What is exactly the situation of Christians, and is it all Christians or just certain denominations being targeted?
I would say all Christians. Some of the Catholic churches that was able to have an agreement with the Chinese communist regime, and they operating under very strict rules. But I would say a church like, for example, the Church of Almighty God is a church that been established for many, many years now. Their members been facing persecution, been killing.
What kind of church is
They
that?
are church. They are basically, they believe in the Bible. They have their own teaching and their education. Protestant. And basically we see that persecution that taking place all around them, from like a gentleman that just all their mistakes and all their fault that they are basically Christians and they are worshiping. There is no political activity here. But like a man like the Wang Zhan, he's 43 years old, that was killed and tortured for his faith. This has happened right now in China. Miss Hong Yui, she was also killed for her faith. These are all evidence. These are people, Christians, that they are facing persecution every single day. And the reason of this, they just belong to a church of the Church of Almighty God, and they don't belong or they do not affiliate with the communist regime. And that's basically what's happening right now to them.
What about Tibetans? Long-standing problems.
Mm-hmm. So since we were invaded in 1949 till 59, the Chinese Communist government was responsible for destroying over 90% of the Tibetan Buddhist monasteries inside of Tibet. Since then, they have started to rebuild the monasteries, but we see that whether it's Tibetan Buddhists, Uyghur Muslims, religion is something that unifies people. And as soon as there is something that unifies people and forces them to mobilize, automatically they start questioning why they don't have the same freedoms. And that makes, for example, for Tibetan Buddhists, a lot of the monasteries are central points where political activism takes place. So for example, in 2016 and 17, the world's largest Tibetan Buddhist institute called Larungar in eastern Tibet, in Kham, they started to demolish over 50% of the residential buildings in the area. So that area actually has over 10,000 practicing Tibetan Buddhists and Buddhists from across the world. So they're doing this, and they said that it was to help with overcrowding, but there was absolutely they did not ask for the permission or opinions of the actual residents and the practicing Buddhists who were practicing there very peacefully, and they started destroying. And we started seeing these very graphic videos of the demolitions taking place and nuns and monks being put into buses, forced, like basically evicted from their homes, and also to sign documents vowing that they'd never return. 3 Tibetan nuns actually committed suicide and left notes that explicitly said that they couldn't bear the pain of being harassed by the Chinese government simply for practicing Buddhism quietly. And we see that the Chinese government identifies as being secular, but they really do care so much about different religions. And for the Tibetan people, I think one thing that's really important is His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the spiritual leader of the Tibetan people. His Holiness the Dalai Lama is in his mid-80s now. He's a human being. He will pass one day. So the Chinese government knows that His Holiness the Dalai Lama is the symbol of compassion, kindness, love. And as soon as he passes away, they know that there is this void in power for the Tibetan people. So for them, it's also a matter of them trying to assert that same control to help choose who the next Dalai Lama will be, which we know that that's not how it works. There's an entire religious system of reincarnation that the Tibetan Buddhists follow.
So Christianity, though, seems to be growing in China. How do you explain that, and how are new Christians coping there?
I can tell you that wherever there is persecution, there is always increase in the faith. This is something that I always say, Christians like nails. The harder you hit them in the head, the more they go deeper and deeper and deeper. They have to go through a whole process of protection and deceiving the regime or the government and the policing system. But I would tell you one thing, once they believe in what they believe and once they start fighting, they never stop. Nobody can take this away from them. Okay.
Up next, how China is influencing Canadians and other foreign nationals to see things their way.
Everything that you know and learn inside of the walls of China is heavily regulated by the state. So expatriates here, it's really difficult to think that, their entire lives they've been fed these lies.
Welcome back. Last year, details of a classified report issued by Australia's Prime Minister revealed that the Chinese Communist Party has spent nearly a decade trying to influence that country's major political parties and various levels of government. And there are reports that the same thing is happening here in North America through think tanks and friendly expatriate communities. So how widespread is this? Sunam, we heard a lot here about the Confucius Institute spreading influence through the universities. There are issues with some think tanks. What can you tell us about it?
So with the Confucius Institutes, what's really important to note is that under the guise of spreading Chinese culture, history, and language, what they're actually doing is they're infiltrating free educational institutions in free countries, and they're basically spreading their propaganda and also censoring certain types of information, including information about the Tiananmen Square massacre, about Tibetans, about Uyghurs. So actually in Toronto in 2014, Students for a Free Tibet Canada, we actually spearheaded a campaign against the Confucius Institute. They were trying to infiltrate the Toronto District School Board, which has access to over 250,000 students across Toronto. And what's different about this is that usually Confucius Institutes, you'll find them in universities. So in 2014, we started this campaign. We worked with Amnesty International, Falun Gong practitioners, people that want democracy in China, and we were able to lobby different board members on the trustees, the board of trustees on the TDSB, and we were able to get them evicted. We were able to terminate the contract. But what's disturbing is that Chinese students, international students, are they take up a lot of space in universities in Canada. So recently, it's been covered in the media. One of our board members, Chimil, she was running for the president of the student union at the U of T Scarborough campus. And overnight, she had a post on her personal Instagram account just wishing people a happy Tibetan Lunar New Year. And overnight, over 10,000 angry Chinese students left really, really disturbing comments on her Instagram page. And people started to wonder now, is this going to affect her presidency? When you start reading the comments itself, you realize that a lot of these comments are just racist, discriminatory, basically cyberbullying. A lot of the comments talked about her character as a person, even death threats, and they started a petition on change.org. But what we saw is that they would only attack Chimi's identity as a Tibetan person who wants independence and self-determination for her people. None of it talked about what her campaign slogans were or anything like that. So I think we see that the Chinese government is trying to extend their soft power by trying to get into universities. And yeah, this is something that we're following closely.
Why are so many Chinese expatriates pro the regime? A lot of them are.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the Chinese government uses lies and violence and manipulate to limit people's, living. So for a lot of Chinese people, even they are here, they are very, very scared because they know that the Chinese government could watch them here in Canada. They can follow you. They can collect your information, and also they can, to just cancel your visa to go back to China to visit. They can just to close your account if you are not obey to them. Of course, it's very scary, and even for this event that I said that I called many friends, many of them, they are scared. So it makes us feel very unsafe here.
Are you saying that all the expats who are pro the government are somehow hiding what they really feel because they're scared? But surely a lot of them actually believe that.
And there is a lot of them believe that, and there is a lot of them that are receiving benefits from that as well. How did we end with many of the dictatorships around the world, from Bhutan to Pharaoh? You know what I mean? We have a lot of supporters. There is a lot of benefits. The regime as well, very generous with their loyal. So when you are loyal to the regime, when you are when you are able to cooperate and coordinate with the regime, they give you, they take care of you, they take care of your family. And when we are talking about a very poor country with the people, with its people, every piece of bread that you get on your table, it does count. Sadly, but this is the truth in China.
I think it's really important to acknowledge, though, that a lot of people that grew up in China have been deeply indoctrinated. They've been brainwashed since they were born, since they were in the womb. So we can't, especially with us, a lot of the comments, we know it's coming from a very ignorant place, and we, like Chimil herself, she was approaching it with compassion and trying to understand that they know no better. They've never had the access because of the Great Firewall, no access to information. Everything that you know and learn inside of the walls of China is heavily regulated by the state. So expatriates here, especially if they're here in their adult life, it's really difficult to think that their entire lives they've been fed these lies.
And how do Chinese expatriates react to the situation of the Uyghurs in your experience?
Let me tell you about what recently has happened in our community member in McMaster University. This happened April 11th. She was having a speech. It was a peaceful speech that she was trying to telling what was going on in East Turkestan, in the so-called in Xinjiang. At the moment, she was talking about all the concentration camps, the peoples are getting all this religious persecution. So one of the Chinese student was there, and then he just stood up and he was yelling at her, and then verbally actually abused her, verbally harassed her. And then she was quite upset, quite shocked, the speaker. And then he left, and he was shouting and saying F-words towards her. And then later on, we found out that he's not the only one supporting the Chinese government. But later on, we found out that the Chinese government has established a community within the university, especially in Canada. So we encourage the people at the moment not to trust, especially the people coming from China. Don't get me wrong, I'm not against Chinese, but I'm talking about the Chinese Communist Party regime.
Okay.
Thank you.
There's more after the break. Stick around.
Yeah, this all happened because of the retaliation of Chinese Communist Party.
Yes.
So as ordinary Canadian people, if you would like to visit the China, I would not suggest you to go there. You're not going to be safe.
Welcome back. It's now time for the question and answer segment of our show. And first up, we have Virginia. Hello.
Hello. My question is, should we, as potential tourists and visitors to China, have a legitimate worry, not just in the near future, but in years to come, regarding our potential safety? Or is it buyer beware?
As we all heard the news about these two Canadian diplomats, Michael Korek and Michael Spavor, as well as the gentleman named Schellenberg, who got the penalty, the death penalty in there.
Yeah.
Well, this
Don't
all
deal
happened.
drugs there.
Yes. Yeah, this all happened because of the retaliation of Chinese Communist Party.
Yes.
So, as ordinary Canadian people, if you would like to visit the China in the future, near future, whenever, well, personally, I would not suggest you to go there. You're not going to be safe.
I think the main fear and the main scare that we have security-wise is with our technology, is with our economic relationship with them. Right now, with this coming 5G new technology that coming, I believe that they are more and more will try to commit cyber spying against our interests, against our economic, our security systems, against our secrets. So I would say that this will be the main issue that will be coming next, but also it's very important that we have to understand as Canadians, we have the power to choose if we are buying Chinese product or not.
But you're buying a product by visiting, obviously. And so therefore, they urge you to come, and they give you good prices to go there.
No one is safe in China. This is true. And it's not only 3 or a few Canadian hold in China. Actually, it's more than 200 Canadian in China now, holding and or in prison.
I hope that's helping you make your decision about whether to go.
It does indeed.
Why not Taiwan?
I bet you Southeast Asia. Thank you.
Okay, and when we come back, we will have final thoughts. Don't go away.
On a past episode of theZoomer, we discussed scams that target Zoomers. Gloria writes on Facebook, got an email supposedly from Apple wanting money to continue using their app. Laugh out loud, scam. On a recent call into Zoomer Radio's Fight Back with Libby Znaimer, John from Oshawa weighed in on the ongoing controversy regarding Canada, China, and Huawei.
I think in a couple instances, it could have been a preemptive strike long ago when Trump made his comment about, possible trade relief on the sanctions. So with China as an exchange for her, and right away, as a boxing coach, I teach you to take a punch but give one right away. And we could have punched back right away and said, all right, we'll do the same. But in the reality of it, his comment wasn't realistic, in fact. But going on, China, I think, believes that we are probably a divided and weak country at this point, so they can manipulate us a bit. But I think these comments are from a desperate, weak government and sloppy.
Keep the comments coming in and connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and via email at rsvp@zoomermedia.ca. Don't forget, for free tickets to the show, go to www.universe.com and search Zoomer Media and log on to www.thezoomertv.com for full episodes and more.
theZoomer. It's time for final thoughts, and we'll start to my left.
My final thought is for a message to the Chinese government and the wonderful Chinese ambassador to Canada. We're not going anywhere. If you looked around in this table, you found heroes. Heroes that they are not scared of your bullets, they are not scared of your army, and heroes that they don't care about how much money they have in your account. So my final thoughts to the Chinese government and to the Chinese embassy. We are here, we're not leaving, enough is enough. We will fight for our people, even if it's the last thing that we do. Thank you.
I think what we've seen is that this year will mark 60 years of occupation, 60 years of resistance. We see that Tibetans inside of Tibet have not given up the fight. We've seen 164 people have self-immolated. They've burned their bodies in protest. So I think it's important for us to push for a multilateral forum where like-minded governments come together and to hold China accountable, because it's not just us that need China's economic partnership. They need our partnership as well.
My final word to China is that Taiwan, as a country, some Chinese people may think they're living very peaceful, very happy, and no fear at all. Please leave us alone.
So final thoughts about the Uyghur people is, right now the 3 million Uyghurs are in the concentration camps, just being an Uyghur. So I'm calling the Canadian government and also the US government to apply the global Magnitsky Act to punish the Chinese government, to apply all this sanction against them, whoever involved in this discrimination and as well as the genocide in the 21st century. Thank you.
Every group of people in China, every field of Chinese people are victims of the Chinese communist regime. And I really wish our Canadians could try your best to make a democratic China, because it will benefit everybody in the world, because the Chinese communist regime is doing very evil things, and they make the largest humanities disaster in the world.
Well, there may be a silver lining to the crisis Canada finds itself in with China, and that is it could be an opportunity to reset the relationship as Canadians take a more realistic view of that country and our relationship with it. Thank you to my panelists and to our audience. That's all the time we have. We'll see you next time. For now, it's time to zoom out.